But on top of the market values, Manu, and the market value updates, we've also got the actual football on the pitch. We've already had the Europa League, so congratulations to Aston Villa on winning that. But perhaps most importantly, we've got the Champions League coming this weekend between PSG and Arsenal. And I think we should maybe take a moment just to break down how players' market values can actually be impacted by the Champions League, Manu, because obviously market values are dictated by dozens of different factors, but nothing can really kind of drive up a player's market value quite like starring and performing admirably well in the biggest stages. And alongside the World Cup, the Champions League final is probably the biggest stage you can get as a footballer.
I would actually argue it's the biggest stage. Of course, the World Cup draws enormous eyeballs, but so does the Champions League final, right? And I think from a perspective of what happens on a yearly spectacle, it is the biggest game. Period, right? People always say, talk about the Super Bowl. Well, step aside Super Bowl, you are 10th of what the Champions League final is in terms of attendance. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the biggest stage. And for players, it is an opportunity to really increase their market value. Although, Stefan, I know you have a list prepared for this. Looking at both the Arsenal and PSG squads, can they really increase their market value any further?
Yeah, it's a fair question. They're both already two of the most viable squads in the world, aren't they? I think it's a fair point, and I think when it comes to PSG, I think they've obviously proved it last season in the Champions League, so it'd be a lot harder for a player to maybe stand out in that regard. Although we did obviously have Stefan on from the French team recently to talk about Kvara, who obviously has been outstanding for PSG this season and has many users in the market value forum, which we discussed on the episode that day. And I think fans in general would say his market value is maybe a little lower than expected. So among the PSG players, he's one that could maybe stand out in this final and see his market value rise. But I mean, in terms of Arsenal, they've got a lot of obviously established players, but they've also maybe got some players who, you know, having just won the Premier League, of course, would want to go on and stamp their approval in the Champions League. You know, you got young players like Miles Skelly, maybe even Max Dowen if he comes on in that game. But I'm even maybe looking at kind of established stars. You know, you've got players like Saka, Odegaard, and Havertz who've all played parts in this season, so to speak. They've all been in and out of the team despite being big players for Arsenal, and I think they'd be looking at this Champions League final to say, well, you know, I've only been able to play a part of the role in the team getting to the Premier League title and perhaps getting to the Champions League final, but if I can do something in this final, I'll be able to say I contributed, I offered everything I could for the season. And, you know, if someone like Havertz or Saka or Odegaard go out and score a hat-trick against PSG in the Champions League final, then I think that'd certainly go some way to helping their market value, I'll put it that way. And then there's other players like maybe like Declan Rice, who's already kind of rubbing shoulders with the best central midfielders in the world. If he goes out and obviously performs, particularly against that PSG midfield, which I think have basically bulldozed any opposition they played this season, then that would do really, really well for Declan Rice. But it's really interesting, Manu, because more or less every player to a man in both teams will also be going to the World Cup. So it's about kind of building up that momentum, isn't it, as a player? I don't want to say buzz, but I guess buzz is the right word maybe, in terms of, you know, finish the season, both teams obviously winning their domestic leagues, both teams in the Champions League final, and then both teams have stars who are going off to play for big nations at the World Cup. So there's a lot of stars between these two teams, Manu, who could use this Champions League almost as a jumping off point for the World Cup in terms of how their market value may change in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few that you may name. There's a few that already have quite a high market value. I'm thinking someone like Desired Doué, right, was at 90 million. Is this the moment he's going to 100 million plus? Kvara you mentioned already. I'm also thinking, you know, Kai Havertz, who's seen his market value drop quite a bit because of injuries, lack of form, etc. But I mean, people remember he scored the winner for Chelsea in their Champions League final, right? He could now win a second Champions League with a second London team, which actually quite a significant achievement. And his market value is currently only 50 million euros. If he wins the Champions League and then goes with Germany to the World Cup, well, he's actually already announced as being part of the Germany squad. He could be a really good candidate for a massive market value jump, right? So he definitely comes to mind. And the another one is Odegaard, his market value seems low.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I said, both of them, have been in and out of the squad, but both are now back playing for Arsenal.
Yeah.
Both will play key roles for their nations. Obviously, Havertz will almost certainly start up front for Germany, and Odegaard will be that playmaker for Norway. So if both of them, coming into good form, coming into good fitness, then go into the Champions League final and perform, then, it's a really good kind of runway for them going forward. But to go on to the data that you mentioned, I did kind of ask our data team to dig into the numbers here and take a look at how are the biggest market value increases for players who recently won the Champions League. And I have pulled together a list of the top 15 players. So if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you can also take a look at this list now. I'll run through it for those of you who are maybe listening to the podcast or driving the kids to school or something, or just out on a jog or something like that, or sitting in the gym working away. And the list starts off, so it's basically a list of all the players, what season they obviously won the Champions League, and then the corresponding market value increase. And starting from 15 upwards, we have Alisson and Van Dijk for Liverpool in 2018-19, who saw a market value increase of 15 million euros. Nuno Mendes for PSG last year saw a 15 million increase. Serge Gnabry, Bayern Munich forward, saw his market value increase by 18 million euros after they won the Champions League in 2019-20. Rodrigo and Valverde also saw their market value increase by 20 million euros after corresponding Champions League wins. Rodrigo in 2022 and Valverde in 2024. Luis Suarez back in 2015 for Barcelona. So his market value increased by 20 million euros. So did Alphonso Davies for Bayern Munich in 2020. Then we have Vitinha and PSG defender Pacho, the PSG duo. Both saw their market values increase by 20 million euros last season. Going back to 2018, Gareth Bale saw his market value increase by 20 million euros after Real Madrid won in 2018. Vinicius Jr. in 2024 saw his market value increase by 30 million euros after Real Madrid beat Borussia Dortmund. That's matched by Doué last season, as we touched on, beating Inter Milan. And in the top two, well, I guess Trent Alexander-Arnold's joint with Doué and Vinicius Jr. For when Liverpool won the Champions League in 2019. His market value increased by 30 million euros. But the player who's seen the biggest market value increase after winning the Champions League, Manu, is none other than Sadio Mané, the Liverpool forward, after winning the Champions League in 2019, and his market value increased by 35 million euros. I think very much solidified him as a world-class forward at that point in the season. But just going through that list, Manu, and I'll get onto like the averages and stuff in a moment, but just going through that list, what stands out to you among those players?
Oh, what stands out? I mean, it's a very good question. I think they all kind of burst onto the scene. I mean, Davies had a phenomenal year that year. Sadio Mané, I mean, that Liverpool team, I think they were kind of undervalued at the time. And we had to do a lot of corrections in market value for them. Trying to think, this seems like a catch question, like something that I'm missing. So I think you might have to reveal it to me, but I feel like I'm back in school. But I think what also stands out to me is, especially when you look at PSG, there is still room. I mean, Doué, I can see a world where Doué next year shows up on this list twice.
Yeah, I actually think you made a really interesting point about Liverpool, and that's maybe something we can compare to Arsenal, because that Liverpool team proved that they could do something by winning that Champions League, didn't they? And that's why we saw guys like Sadio Mané, Alexander-Arnold, rise so significantly, because it was them cementing themselves as world-class players, which is why their market values increased so much. And it's, as we touched on, Arsenal already do have a number of the best players in the world, but I mean, if you take a look at maybe like Bukayo Saka, obviously he won the Premier League, so that's technically his first major title for Arsenal, but he's been in and out of that team this season with injuries. If he can go on and do something in this Champions League final, then I think we'd probably see something maybe not as high as maybe Sadio Mané reaching 35 million euros, but his market value has been kind of plateauing recently and actually dropping because his influence in the Arsenal team has been limited due to injuries. But if he can go on and do something in this Champions League final and say, no, I am a world-class player, I'm going to win this game for Arsenal, so to speak, then I think that'd be huge. But aside from that, the ones that really stand out to me, and you obviously, when it comes to market values, like anything when it comes to current season values, is that inflation has to be taken into account. And the fact that Luis Suarez got a 20 million upgrade in 2015, I think just goes to show just how incredible he was for Barcelona that season.
Yeah.
And to maybe a lesser extent, Gareth Bale in 2018. I'm trying to remember which final that was, if that was the one with the overhead kick. But yeah, really impressive from him in 2018, which was great.
That was the season where he got run off the pitch and still scored, right? Remember that goal?
Yeah, against Inter Milan, I think it was.
Yeah, he was like 5 meters outside the pitch and somehow still got back onto the pitch and maintained control of the ball and scored an unbelievable goal. He was unplayable. It's Gareth Bale at that time, unplayable, and really showed the amount of talent he had, even though he didn't really always fulfill it. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, he showed up when it mattered, and that was the kind of important thing, I suppose.
And for Wales, and when he played golf.
Exactly. I'm sure his market value as a golfer is through the roof. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, just to kind of sum it all up, as we've got at the bottom of the graphic there, the average market value increase for these top 15 players was 22 million euros after winning the World Cup. Sorry, after winning the Champions League. So I think that goes some way, Manu, to showing what's at stake here for both Arsenal and PSG on Saturday.
It really does. And I think, to be quite honest with you too, it's the two best teams in Europe. There's not much of an argument you can make in that regard. PSG has an amazing Bayern Munich side to get there, and Arsenal have been playing an incredible strong season in the Premier League, and it is going to be an incredibly fascinating final. PSG feel like the final boss at the moment, don't they, as defending Champions League winners, and there isn't many teams that have managed to win the Champions League twice in a row. Real Madrid, of course, have done it, but many other teams have failed to do it in recent years. And PSG feel like a team that could actually do it, win it twice in a row.